A cup of coffee grows cold on the table as Marina Miller stares at a faded photograph that arrived in the mail this morning. There's no return address, just a plain brown envelope with her name typed in a simple font. The picture shows a dark-haired woman walking down a narrow street, her face partially obscured by a colorful scarf. On the back, a single handwritten word, Ishtar. Marina recognizes the face. She's studied every line, every expression during months of investigation that seemed to lead nowhere. It's Lara Al-Mansour, the Brazilian woman who vanished in Dubai 8 years ago, leaving behind only theories and speculation. The case resurfaced when her passport was found in an abandoned car on the outskirts of Miami, bearing impossible stamps from countries visited years after her official disappearance. The phone rings, cutting through the tense silence of her apartment in South Beach. Marina hesitates before answering, her fingers trembling slightly. In recent months, answering the phone has become an exercise in courage. "Marina Miller," she says, keeping her voice steady. Silence on the other end, followed by a heavy breath. "You shouldn't have dug into this," a woman's voice whispers, muffled, almost unrecognizable. "Some deaths are necessary for others to live." The line goes dead. Marina replaces the phone with trembling hands. It's the third anonymous call. This week, first veiled threats, then more direct warnings. Now, something that sounds dangerously close to a confession. She returns to the photograph. Ishtar. The name resonates in her mind like a disturbing echo. She found this reference in Lara's fragmented diary, discovered months ago in an abandoned motel in rural Texas. The pages, stained with moisture, reveal fragments of a life that officially didn't exist. "They call me Ishtar here." He was. Never who he claimed to be. "If anyone reads this, find me at the place of the burnt flowers." Marina rises, walking to the window overlooking Biscayne Bay. The afternoon sun paints the water gold, but she can only think of the calm waters of the Persian Gulf, where it all began. Alexandre Al-Mansour had constructed his version of events with surgical precision. Lara was unstable. She had run away, probably killed herself somewhere remote. His money and influence had silenced questions, bought silence, buried truths. But the dead don't stamp passports. Her cell phone vibrates with a text message from an unknown number. "Miami International Airport, Gate 3. 1 hour, come alone." Marina looks at her watch. 3:47 p.m. She has just over an hour. Her journalistic instinct screams to go, but her survival instinct whispers danger. In recent months, 2 people who had agreed to talk about Alexandre Al-Mansour are dead. Carlos Mendez, a former employee of Alexandre's import company, died in an accidental fire in his apartment in Coconut Grove. Roberto Castillo, a diplomat who had intervened in Lara's disappearance case, suffered a heart attack at 42, with no history of heart problems. Marina grabs her bag, checks that her recorder is working, and slips a copy of the photograph into her jacket pocket. If it's a trap, at least she'll leave clues. The drive to the airport is a torment of anxiety. At every traffic light, Marina checks her rearview mirrors, looking for cars that might be following her. Her paranoia has become a constant companion. Since she decided to reopen the investigation into Lara, what began as journalistic curiosity has turned into a personal obsession. There's something about Lara's story that echoes her own experience. Women who trusted the wrong man, who believed promises that turned out to be lies. Miami International Airport buzzes with the typical afternoon activity. Marina walks toward Gate 3, her eyes scanning each face, each suspicious movement. Near the indicated location, a middle-aged woman with grey hair pulled back in a low bun holds a magazine without reading it. Her eyes meet Marina's with instant recognition. "Marina Miller?" she asks, rising. Her voice has an accent Marina can't quite place, perhaps Spanish, perhaps Arabic. Marina nods. My name is Elena. I prefer not to give my last name. The woman gestures for them to sit in a more secluded area. I knew Lara, the real Lara. Where? In Medellin. She lived in a small house on the outskirts, worked at a veterinary clinic under a false name. She said she had escaped a marriage that was a prison. Elena pauses, her eyes scanning the surroundings, but it wasn't quite like that. Marina discreetly turns on the recorder in her pocket. What do you mean? Lara wasn't a victim, Marina. At least not just a victim. Elena leans forward, lowering her voice. She knew exactly who Alexandra was before she married him. She knew about the network, the business, the other women, and she decided to destroy him from the inside. Marina's world seems to tilt. You're saying that she planned everything? The wedding, the honeymoon, the disappearance. Lara gathered information for months, documented every crime, every transaction. She had enough evidence to bring down not only Alexandra, but his entire international network. Marina feels her heart racing. Where is that evidence? Elena smiles sadly. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Lara told me she had hidden everything in a place Alexandra would never think to look. She called it the place of the burnt flowers. The phrase from the diary. Marina remembers Lara's shaky handwriting. If anyone reads this, find me at the place of the burnt flowers. Do you have any idea where that would be? I have more than an idea. Elena pulls an envelope from her purse. I have a map. Marina takes the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, besides a hand-drawn map, is a photograph. Lara, clearly, older, standing in front of a small white church with burned gardens around it. On the back, a date, 3 years ago. Where is this? Scene end. Cocora Valley, Colombia. There's an abandoned church there where they used to grow flowers for funerals. A fire destroyed everything a few years ago. Lara was hiding. There, in the retired priest's house. Elena stood up abruptly. But there's something you need to know before you decide to go after her. What? Lara isn't there anymore. She was taken 3 months ago. Marina's blood ran cold. Taken by whom? By Alexandra. He finally found out where she was. Elena started to walk away. And if you want to save her, you need to find the evidence before he destroys everything. Wait! Marina stood up quickly. How can I be sure you're telling the truth? Elena stopped, turned, and took something out of her pocket. It was a ring, a simple wedding band, but Marina recognized the details from the case files. Lara's wedding ring. She asked me to give this to someone she could trust, someone who wouldn't give up searching for the truth. Elena placed the ring in Marina's hand. Lara said that if anything happened to her, the evidence would be at the church, hidden in the place where no one would look, under the altar. Elena disappeared into the crowd before Marina could ask more questions. Marina stood there, holding the wedding ring of a woman who officially hadn't existed for 8 years, looking at a map that could lead her to the truth or to death. The airport continued its frenetic dance around her, but Marina felt in a bubble of absolute silence. 3 days later, Marina landed in Bogotá. The trip to Cocora Valley would be long and dangerous, especially if Alexandre really knew she was following Lara's trail. During the flight, Marina had researched everything she could about the region, a remote mountainous area, known for the tallest wax palm trees in the world and for being a refuge for guerrillas and drug traffickers. Not exactly a safe tourist destination for a Brazilian journalist traveling alone. At the hotel in Bogotá, Marina found a message waiting for her at the reception. White envelope, no identification. Inside, a photograph that made her blood run cold, herself, walking. In Miami International Airport 3 days before, circled in red. On the back, we already know where you are. Marina felt her legs weaken. They, whoever they were, had followed her every move. Maybe Eleanor was a trap. Maybe it was all an elaborate setup to lure her away from Brazil, where it would be easier to make her disappear. But Lara's ring burned in her pocket like an unfulfilled promise. The next morning, Marina rented a car and began the journey to Salento, the closest town to Cocora Valley. The road snaked through the Andes Mountains, each curve revealing landscapes of brutal beauty, deep ravines, dense forests, mist-covered peaks. It was the kind of place where people could disappear forever without a trace. During the trip, Marina couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor's revelation. Lara wasn't just a victim. She was an undercover investigator, a woman who had sacrificed her own identity to expose an international criminal network. That would explain the stamps in her passport, the mysterious trips. Lara had been collecting evidence, following the trail of money and crime that connected the Middle East to Latin America. But if Elena was telling the truth, Alexandra had finally captured Lara. And if the evidence was really hidden in the church in Cocora Valley, Marina might be the only person capable of finding it, or the next to disappear. Salento was a colorful town, its colonial houses painted in vibrant hues, contrasting with the intense green of the surrounding mountains. Marina stayed in a simple guest house, registering under a false name. The owner, a kind-eyed Colombian woman, offered her coffee and arepas while Marina studied the map drawn by Lara. "Are you going to visit the valley?" the woman asked, noticing the map. "Yes, there's an old church there I'd like to see." The woman's face darkened. "The Church of Santa Rosa. It's not a safe place, girl. There are strange stories about that place, people who go there and never come back." Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. "What kind of stories?" 3 months ago, a group of foreign men went there. They took a woman with them, a foreigner who lived with Father Miguel. She screamed that she didn't want to go, but they forced her. The woman lowered her voice. "Father Miguel tried to stop them. They found his body a week later." Marina's heart pounded. Lara had been there, and now she was in Alexandra's hands. The woman, did you see her? Briefly, dark hair, sad eyes. She spoke Portuguese with a Brazilian accent. She called herself Rosa, but Father Miguel once told me that wasn't her real name. Marina knew she was on the right track, and she also knew she was walking straight into a trap. That night, Marina could barely sleep. Every sound, the wind in the windows, the footsteps in the hallway, the distant barking of dogs, made her jump out of bed. She had sent a message to her editor in Brazil explaining where she was and why, with instructions to publish everything, if anything happened to her. It was a precaution, but it offered little comfort in the face of reality. She was alone, in a remote region of another country, following the trail of a woman who had defied men powerful enough to make her disappear twice. At dawn, Marina began the hike to Cocora Valley. Lara's map indicated a secondary trail, far from the main tourist path. The landscape was surreal. Giant wax palm trees rose like solitary sentinels against the blue sky, their leaves whispering, secrets that Marina couldn't decipher. The hike took 3 hours. When she finally spotted St. Rose's Church, Marina understood why Lara had chosen this place to hide. It was a small, white building almost lost among the hills, surrounded by the charred remains of what had once been a flower garden. Even from a distance, Marina could smell the ashes still lingering in the air. The church was empty, its doors open to the wind that swept down from the mountains. Marina entered cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the silent space. The altar was simple, a wooden table covered with a stained white cloth. Behind it, a wooden crucifix watched the emptiness with eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Marina knelt before the altar, running her hands over the stone base. Something felt odd about the construction. One of the stones seemed slightly out of alignment, She pressed the stone, which moved with an almost inaudible click. A secret compartment opened. Inside, Marina found a small metal chest, sealed and surprisingly heavy. Her hands trembled as she opened the simple lock. The contents made her gasp. Hundreds of photographs, documents, bank statements, recordings on small digital devices. It was a complete file of Alexandra Al-Mansour's criminal activities. The photographs showed young women, some Marina recognized from unsolved missing persons cases from recent years. Brazilian, Colombian, Venezuelan, all beautiful, all disappeared. The documents revealed a complex human trafficking network stretching from the Middle East to Latin America, with Alexandra as one of the main operators. But what shocked Marina most was finding photographs of herself. Images taken secretly over the past few months, documenting her every move, every interview, every discovery. Alexandra had been following her investigation from the beginning. One of the recordings caught her attention. It was recent, Lara's voice. If anyone is listening to this, it means they found me. I knew this would happen eventually. Alexandra is smarter and more dangerous than anyone imagines, but I did it. I managed to document everything, every crime, every victim, every transaction. The evidence is here, but there's something more. Lara's voice paused and Marina could hear her heavy breathing. Alexandra doesn't act alone. There's someone in Brazil, someone powerful enough to make people officially disappear, to manipulate investigations, to buy silence. Someone I never imagined could be involved. Marina felt her heart racing. It's someone close to me, someone I completely trusted before discovering the truth. If you found this evidence, be careful who you trust. Alexandra's network has tentacles. In Brazil, too. The recording ended abruptly. Marina sat on the cold church floor, trying to process what she had just heard. Lara had uncovered not only Alexandra's international network, but also a collaborator in Brazil, someone close to her, someone she trusted. Suddenly, Marina heard the sound of cars approaching, multiple vehicles, powerful engines. She quickly put the most important evidence in her bag and ran to one of the church's side windows. 3 black SUVs had stopped in front of the church. Armed men got out of the vehicles, moving with the precision of experienced soldiers. And in the back seat of the middle vehicle, Marina saw a face she recognized immediately from the photographs. Alexandre Al-Mansour. He had come personally. Marina realized there was a back door in the church. She stowed the chest in an internal compartment of her backpack and silently headed for the rear exit. But when she opened the door, she came face to face with an armed man waiting for her. "Marina Miller," he said in heavily accented English. "Mr. Al-Mansour would like to speak with you." Marina was escorted back inside the church, where Alexandra Al-Mansour waited for her. He was shorter than she had imagined, but he radiated a cold authority that made the air around him seem denser. His dark eyes studied her with the intensity of a predator assessing its prey. "Ms. Miller," he said in perfect English, though with a slight Arabic accent, "you've been very persistent." "Where's Lara?" Marina kept her voice steady, despite the fear threatening to suffocate her. Alexandra smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. "That's an interesting question. Where do you think she is? You kidnapped her 3 months ago." Kidnapping is a strong word. Alexandra slowly walked around the church, his hands behind his back. "I'd say it was more of a reunion between husband and wife." Marina felt nauseous. "You were never really married." "Legally we were, and still are." Alexandra stopped in front of the altar. "Did you find what you were looking for here?" Marina hesitated. If Alexandra knew about the evidence, why was he still talking to her? Why hadn't he simply ordered her killed? "I don't know what you're talking about." Alexandra laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Marina, please, don't insult me. I know exactly why you're here. The question is, do you know why I'm here? To retrieve the evidence Lara collected against you. Partially correct. Alexandra gestured to one of his men who approached carrying a chair. Sit down. There are some things you need to understand before you decide what to do with this information. Marina sat down reluctantly, keeping her backpack close to her body. Lara isn't who you think she is, Alexandra began. She's not the innocent victim who decided to take revenge on her cruel husband. She was an operative. Operative of what? Interpol. Federal police. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that she was assigned to infiltrate my operation, the marriage, the honeymoon, even the disappearance. It was all planned by her and her superiors. Marina felt the world spin around her. You're lying. Am I right? Alex pulled a phone from his pocket and showed Marina a picture. It was Lara, clearly younger, wearing a police uniform alongside other officers. This photo was taken 5 years before our wedding. Lara Mendes Silva, a special agent with the Brazilian Federal Police, specializing in undercover operations. Marina studied the photograph. It was undeniably Lara, but Marina refused to accept it. If she was an agent, why didn't she call for backup? Why did she disappear? Because she discovered something she shouldn't have. Alex put away his phone. Lara discovered that it wasn't just my operation that was under investigation. She discovered there was a mole inside the federal police. Someone feeding me information about investigations, warning me when agents were closing in. Marina's blood ran cold. Lara's recording had mentioned someone in Brazil, someone close, someone trusted. Who? Marina whispered. Ah, that's the million-dollar question. Alex leaned forward. Chief Inspector Roberto Castillo, the same man who intervened in the case of my supposed involvement in Lara's disappearance. The same man who died of a convenient heart attack when you started asking too many questions. Marina remembered the diplomat who had died. Roberto Castillo wasn't a diplomat. He was a chief inspector with the federal police. Lara discovered Castillo was selling information. She discovered he knew about her undercover mission from the start, that he had tipped me off about her. That's why she disappeared. She wasn't running from me, she was running from him. And you found her anyway. Eventually. Alex stood up. But not to kill her, Marina. To protect her. Marina laughed bitterly. Protect her? After everything. You did. After all the women you trafficked? The women in my photographs weren't trafficked, Marina. They were saved. Alex started walking again. My operation isn't what you think. Yes, I use the front of a human trafficking ring. But in reality, I infiltrate these rings to destroy them from within. Marina shook her head. That's impossible. Is it? Then explain how so many of these missing women were found alive and safe in other countries with new identities, living normal lives. Alex stopped in front of her. Explain how evidence Lara collected led to the dismantling of 3 human trafficking rings in the last 2 years. Marina felt like she was sinking in quicksand. Every revelation completely shifted her understanding of the situation. If you're on the right side, why all the threats? Why did Carlos Mendes die? Why did Roberto Castillo die? Carlos Mendes didn't die because of me. He died because he found out about Castillo and threatened to expose him. Castillo had him killed. Alex sat down in one of the church chairs. And Castillo didn't die of a heart attack. He was murdered when his own contacts discovered he was being investigated. The threats I received weren't from me. They were from people who want that evidence to stay buried. People who worked with Castillo, who have a lot to lose if the truth comes out. Marina felt lost in a web of lies and half-truths. Where is Lara now? Alex was silent for a long moment. Lara is dead, Marina. Marina's world crumbled. What? She died 2 months ago, not because of me, because of the people who found her before I did. Alex stood up, walking to the window. When I learned she was here, I came as fast as I could, but I was too late. You're lying. Marina stood up, her voice cracking. Elena told me you had taken her. Elena? Alex turned quickly. Elena Vasquez? A woman with graying hair, a Spanish accent? You know her? Elena worked for Castillo. She's the one who tortured Lara to death, trying to find out where the evidence was hidden. Alex approached Marina. Elena is the one who brought you here, isn't she? Marina felt her legs weaken. Elena had lied. She had used Marina to find the evidence, pretending to be an ally. Where is Lara's body? Alex gestured towards the window. Buried out there in the burnt garden. Father Miguel tried to protect her, but he was killed too. Marina ran to the window. In the fire-ravaged garden, there were 2 simple wooden crosses, almost invisible among the charred plants. Why should I believe you? Marina turned, tears streaming down her face. Because, a woman's voice said from behind her, he's telling the truth. Marina turned and saw Elena standing in the church doorway, accompanied by 2 armed men. But now Elena wasn't disguising her intentions. Her eyes were cold, calculating. Thank you for leading us to the evidence, Marina. You saved us a lot of work. Alex moved quickly, positioning himself between Marina and Elena. You got here faster than I expected. You got sentimental, Alex. You wasted time talking when you should have simply taken the evidence and left. Elena gestured to her men. Kill them both. Marina saw Alex draw a weapon with surprising speed, hitting one of Elena's men before they could fire. The second man took cover behind a pew, exchanging fire with Alex. Marina, Alex yelled. The back door, run! Marina hesitated for a second. Part of her still didn't trust Alex, but the alternative was to die right there. She ran for the back door as the gunfire echoed through the church. Outside, Marina saw more men approaching, Elena's reinforcements. There was nowhere to run. The surrounding mountains offered few hiding places, and she didn't know the area. That's when she heard the sound of helicopters approaching. 2 Colombian military helicopters appeared over the valley, descending rapidly towards the church. Soldiers quickly rappelled down, establishing a perimeter around the building. An officer approached Marina, speaking in Spanish. She replied in Portuguese that she didn't understand, and he switched to basic English. Are you Marina Souza, Brazilian journalist? Marina nodded, still confused. Interpol requested our intervention. You're safe now. Inside the church, the shooting had stopped. Marina saw Elena being escorted by soldiers, her hands cuffed. Alex was also being detained, but he seemed to be cooperating willingly. Later, at a military base in Bogota, Marina finally began to understand the scope of what she had uncovered. An Interpol agent, who identified himself only as Rodriguez, explained the real situation. Alex Al-Mansour has been working with us for 5 years, Rodriguez said. He infiltrated an international human trafficking ring, using his privileged position to identify and dismantle criminal cells. And Lara? Lara Silva was our best field agent. She was assigned to confirm Alex's information and help identify the Brazilian collaborators in the network. Rodriguez paused. Unfortunately, we discovered too late that we had an informant inside our own operation. Chief Inspector Castillo, among others. Castillo was part of a corrupt cell within the Brazilian Federal Police. When Lara discovered this, she had to disappear to protect the operation and her own life. Marina felt a mixture of relief and sadness. But she's dead. Yes, Elena Vasquez and her team found her 2 months ago. Lara resisted torture for weeks, but eventually, Rodriguez didn't finish the sentence. Marina remembered the evidence in her backpack. Lara managed to document everything. The proof is here. This evidence will help prosecute over 50 people in 6 countries. Lara's work wasn't in vain. Days later, back in Brazil, Marina found herself at the cemetery where Lara had finally been buried under her real name, Lara Mendes Silva, Special Agent of the Federal Police. The ceremony was small and discreet, only close family and a few colleagues who knew her true identity. Marina placed a bouquet of white flowers on the headstone. Beside the grave, Alex Almanzor stood in silence, his eyes fixed on the plaque identifying the woman who had been his wife of convenience, but whom he had learned to respect and eventually love. She really loved him? Marina asked, breaking the silence. Alex took a moment to answer. At first, no, it was just a job for her. But over time, he paused, running a hand through his hair. Lara once told me that the line between playing a role and living a life sometimes disappears, especially when you have to live with someone for so long. Marina observed his face, searching for signs of a lie, but found only genuine sadness. But what happens now? Now I go back to the Middle East. There are other networks to infiltrate, other people to save. Alex turned to Marina. And you? Will you write about this? Marina had thought a lot about this question during the days following the operation in Colombia. Lara's story was extraordinary, but publishing it could compromise other ongoing operations, putting other agents in danger. I will tell the truth about the trafficking rings that were dismantled, about the corruption we uncovered, but Lara's true identity and her role in this, that will remain a secret. Alex nodded in approval. She would have liked that. Lara always said that some stories are more important than the glory of telling them. They remained silent for a few more minutes. Marina thought about how her own life had changed in recent weeks. She had started by searching for a missing woman and discovered a heroine who sacrificed everything to protect other people. There's one thing I still don't understand, Marina said. Why did Lara write in her diary about you never being who you claimed to be, if she knew you were on the side of good? Alex smiled sadly. Because at the beginning, I really wasn't who I claimed to be. I started in real crime, Marina. I trafficked drugs, laundered money, did things I'm not proud of. He looked at Lara's headstone. But when Interpol offered me a chance at redemption, to use my contacts and knowledge to help instead of destroy, Lara was the first person I completely trusted about my transformation. And she believed you, eventually. But it took time. And when she wrote that in her diary, she was still struggling with her own conflicting feelings about me. Marina understood. Lara's story was even more complex than she had imagined. A woman who had fallen in love with someone who was trying to redeem himself, who had struggled between her duties as an agent and her feelings as a woman. She was pregnant when she died, Alex said suddenly. Marina felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. What? 2 months. Lara found out shortly before being captured by Eleanor. Alex knelt before the headstone, placing his hand on the cold stone. She told me in one of the last conversations we had, she was planning to leave the life of an agent. She wanted us to raise the child together, far from all this. Tears rolled down Marina's face. The tragedy of Lara's story was even greater than she had imagined. A woman who had found love in the midst of a dangerous mission, who had decided to choose personal happiness over professional duty, only to be murdered before she could live this new life. Why are you telling me this? Because, Alex stood up, someone needs to know that Lara didn't just die as an agent doing her duty. She died as a woman who chose love, who was willing to give up everything to build a family. She died as someone who believed in the possibility of a new beginning. Marina watched Alex walk away, walking slowly among the tombstones until he disappeared among the trees of the cemetery. She knew she would probably never see him again, that he would return to the dangerous underworld where he operated, continuing the work that Lara had helped to begin. She stayed there a few more minutes looking at Lara Mendes Silva's headstone. The ring Elena had given her was still in her pocket. Marina placed it on the headstone, a final symbol of the love Lara had found and lost. 6 months later, Marina published a series of investigative reports on police corruption and human trafficking that garnered international attention. She didn't mention Lara by name, but dedicated the work to the memory of a courageous woman who sacrificed everything to protect others. The evidence collected by Lara led to the arrests of 17 people in Brazil, including 3 federal police chiefs and a prosecutor. In Colombia, Mexico, and the UAE, 52 more individuals were arrested in coordinated operations. Elena Vasquez was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder and participation in a criminal organization. Alex Al-Mansour disappeared again, but occasionally Marina received postcards from exotic locations, always signed simply with A. She knew he continued his work, infiltrating criminal networks, saving people who might never know who had truly helped them. Marina never married. Occasionally, when questioned about it by friends, she'd say she'd experienced a love story so intense and sacrificial that any ordinary relationship would seem pale in comparison. She never explained that she referred to the love between a federal agent and a reformed criminal who chose redemption, a love that blossomed amidst danger and cost 2 lives, Lara's and the child they never had. Every year, on the anniversary of Lara's death, Marina visited her grave. She always brought white flowers and stayed for an hour, remembering the woman who had changed her own perception of heroism, sacrifice, and love. On her last visit, Marina found a single red rose on the headstone, still fresh, with a small card that simply read, "Ishtar, the goddess who descends to the underworld to save those she loves." Marina knew immediately who had left the rose. Alex still remembered, still honored the memory of the woman he had loved and lost. Sitting there in the cemetery's silence, Marina reflected on how she had started searching for a missing woman and ended up uncovering a far more complex truth about love, sacrifice, and redemption. Lara hadn't disappeared. She'd chosen a dangerous path to protect others, paying the ultimate price for that choice. But her legacy lived on. In the women who were saved, in the criminals who were arrested, in the networks that were dismantled, and in the impossible love story that proved that even in the darkest circumstances, people can choose to do good. Marina rose, gently touched Lara's headstone one last time, and walked toward the cemetery exit. A new investigation awaited. Her another story of missing people who might need someone to tell their truth. As she walked, Marina thought of Lara, not as a victim who had disappeared, but as a heroine who had chosen to disappear to save others. It was an important distinction, one that made all the difference in how her story would be remembered. The sun was setting as Marina reached her car. In the orange twilight sky, she imagined Lara somewhere, free from the pain and fear that had marked her final months, reunited with the child she never met, watching over the people whose lives her sacrifice had saved. It was a comforting image, even though Marina knew the reality was less poetic. Lara was dead, her child was never born, and the world remained a dangerous place where people like Elena Vasquez operated in the shadows. But it was also a world where people like Lara chose to fight against that darkness, where reformed criminals like Alex sought redemption through personal sacrifice, where journalists like Marina refused to let important stories be forgotten. Driving home, Marina turned. On the radio, soft music filled the car's silence, and she allowed herself to cry for the first time in months, not just for Lara, but for all the women who had disappeared, for all the families who never got answers, for all the love stories cut short. by violence, but she also cried for something more positive, for the beauty of Lara's sacrifice, for Alex's courage in seeking redemption, for her own determination to tell stories that mattered. When she arrived home, Marina found an envelope in her mailbox. Inside, a photograph. Lara and Alex together, smiling, her hand resting on her still unnoticeable pregnant belly. On the back, a date, 2 months before Lara's death. It was an image of genuine happiness, of two people who had found love amidst chaos. Along with the photograph, a note. So you remember that not all stories end tragically. Some people manage to truly love, even when time is limited. Thank you for honoring her memory. A. Marina carefully placed the photograph in a special folder, along with all the other evidence and memories she had gathered during her investigation. Someday, when covert operations were no longer necessary, when all the networks had been dismantled, perhaps she could tell Lara Mendez Silva's full story. Until then, she would keep the secret, honor the memory of a woman who had chosen love over safety, sacrifice over self-preservation, truth over convenience. It was a responsibility Marina would carry for the rest of her life, to be the keeper of the true story of a woman the world knew only as another unsolved missing persons case. But Marina knew the truth, and sometimes, in a profession where answers were rare and justice even rarer, knowing the truth was enough. As night fell over Miami, Marina Miller put away her notes and closed the case of Lara Al-Mansour. Not officially. That case would never be officially closed, but personally, she had found all the answers she sought. Lara hadn't disappeared. She had chosen a different life, dangerous and secret to protect others, and in the end, she had paid the price that many heroes pay, with her own life. It was a story of love, sacrifice, redemption, and courage. A story that deserved to be remembered, even if it couldn't be told. And Marina Miller, an investigative journalist, a keeper of secrets, vowed she would never forget the woman she had come to love through her fragmented words, through her silent sacrifices, through her choice to disappear so that others might live. The case was closed, but the memory of Lara Mendez Silva, agent, wife, a mother who never got to be, would live forever in the heart of a journalist who had learned that some stories are too big to tell and too precious to forget.